Hey y'all, it's Chris with Rockin 8 Farm. It's that time again, friends. It is time for another full garden tour. We're right there at that transition where we're switching between April and May. So this is kind of our end of April, beginning of May garden tour. And let's just go take a look at what's changed between now and the last time you saw my garden. Before we do that, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, click that notification bell, and go check out our website, rockin8farm.com. Let's head down to the garden. All right, y'all, we're not into that golden hour for filming yet, so I apologize for the sunshine. Sometimes we just have to film things when we have to film things. Now, some of the things that have changed since the last time that we got together last month is that we've gotten our garden planted. We ended up having to buy a lot of plants at the store this year, y'all. Our seed starting system just did not do what it has done for us in the past. I'm really disappointed, but you know what? Stuff happens. I really do think it's because I got a hold of some potting soil that was just really lacking in nutrients. The stuff was really chunky. It had some bigger pieces of wood in it. I'm not going to buy that brand ever again. A few things did survive. We were able to get some stuff in the garden, but we also had to stop by the big box store. So for those of you that are new to gardening, that's what I encourage you to do anyhow. Don't try to learn too much at once. Like, learning how to garden is enough on its own. I encourage people to start in a couple of 5-gallon buckets with a couple of peppers and some tomatoes and learn how to take care of those plants, and then you can move up from there. So some of the things that I do have to show you are how we rotate crops and some of the care that some of our crops requires. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So this is our elephant garlic bed here, and you're going to notice that we got some tomato cages in these elephant garlic beds. I'm going to tell everybody right now, tomato cages absolutely stink for tomatoes, but tomato cages work great for peppers. As the pepper grows up and those branches get heavy and they want to lean, the tomato cages do a great job of just kind of holding the plant upright. As long as it's leaning, in all directions fairly equally. If it's leaning really heavily to one side, the tomato cage doesn't even do good for peppers. But what you're going to find in these tomato cages is a lot of poblanos. And this is called rotational planting, my friends. So what's going to happen is that these plants, they're getting just enough filtered sunlight while they're babies, that they're not getting real sun scorched and sun scalded. They're being protected by all of the elephant garlic. About the time that these plants are getting bigger and they're really wanting some sunshine, and you would start to worry about these plants shading out the garlic, it won't matter, because this garlic's going to be turning yellow and falling over, and it's going to be time for it to come out anyhow. Now, here's one thing I want to point out about the elephant garlic. These have absolutely gorgeous flowers. I would love to just let all of my elephant garlic bloom. But here's the deal, y'all. If you want nice big cloves of garlic, you cannot have the plant sending energy into the flower. These have got to come off. I want y'all to notice, as I point with my garlic flower here, I've got this strawberry in the ground. That strawberry's been in the ground for 3 seasons now, and it's never really produced for us. And when it does, the pill bugs get to it before we ever get any fruit. So what we're trying to do is go back to a method that we've used in the past, and that is just growing strawberries in buckets. I like the idea with strawberries being a perennial plant to be able to just have a strawberry bed somewhere. But if I've got strawberries growing wild all over my property and all of the berries are getting eaten, well, it's not doing me a whole heck of a lot of good. So I still am going to try to get strawberries planted in places where they can just form a patch. But I'm also going to try growing a lot of strawberries in buckets, and that way I can make sure that we actually get some strawberries. So here's one big bucket that I've grown strawberries in the past. I don't know if it's the case for everybody, but for me, when I grow strawberries in buckets, they tend to be a lot more of an annual than a perennial. It seems like once the weather gets really super hot or really super cold, they just don't do well in the buckets. So unless I'm going to go through the trouble of like bringing the buckets in and taking the buckets back out and making sure that they get watered, then it's just kind of one of those replant strawberries every year thing. Now, what I will do is when this starts sending off a lot of runners, I'll cut off some of those runners, and that's what I'll try planting in different places in the property and try to see if I can get a patch to start. I think I told you it was poblanos that I had planted in here with the garlic. That's actually jalapenos that we have planted in with the garlic. The poblanos are in the next mound over. So the last thing that was in this mound before we planted these poblanos was actually sweet potatoes, and we've been getting a little bit of a surprise this year. I've got these sweet potatoes coming back here. I think what we're probably going to do with these guys, don't mind that one there, that's a weed. I think what I'm probably going to do with these guys is just really harvest the heck out of some sweet potato greens because they're delicious. I mean, they really have kind of a spinach quality. So I think we're going to enjoy lots of sweet potato greens, which are edible, by the way. Do not ever eat potato greens, but sweet potato greens are edible. And these are the Murasaki sweet potatoes. So obviously when we harvested last year, we just left a piece of root behind, and well, here they are coming back. I'm going to have to stay on top of those, really keep them cut back. I'm not trying to get the sweet potatoes out of it, so I'm going to harvest greens heavily, use them in my cooking, feed them to my livestock, and make sure that these two little plates, because these two little guys right here, they will send greens and take over this entire garden and choke out these poblanos. I want my poblano peppers, so I'm going to have to be really careful about just ripping them out if it gets to the point where I can't keep up with them. Y'all know one of the things that we're big on here at Rockin Farm is perennials. I really like the idea of you plant it once and it comes back year after year. It's less work, and it's also just kind of that sustainability portion. You know, what happens if I get to a point where I can't find XYZ? This is all stuff that just comes back year after year after year. This is all herbs here, and y'all know that if you've watched my garden tours in the past. These are the wild dewberries that tend to grow on the fence here. We find them outside the fence. They start growing here because of the water for our perennial herbs, and then we just train these dewberries along the fence so that hopefully we get some of that wild blackberry flavor. But the one thing I wanted to show y'all, because I don't think I've been able to do this in the past, is why these are called walking onions. This is the top set onions that occur on these Egyptian walking onions, and once they get heavy enough, it tips over and it falls on the ground like you can see there. Those are going to root themselves, and then next season a new plant will start growing there. So eventually this bed is going to be so full of Egyptian walking onions that I'm going to be ripping them out. It's already amazing if you look at the difference between last year and this year, how thick and how big all of these Egyptian walking onion plants are. So I'm going to have to say, for any of you that are thinking about planting Egyptian walking onions, be patient. It takes about 2 full seasons, 2 full years from the time you plant them to really get them to just start coming in and just going to town. So we've got a little bit of a warm snap here. It's been a little bit crazy actually, because we got some really rainy weather, and it was that good rain. Now that good rain can sometimes be bad for a garden. It was good for the land because typically, well, you know what? Let's go take a look real quick at the rain gauge. So it looks like what, 3 1/4 inches? We got that 3 1/4 inches over the course of about 3 days. And typically what happens here in Texas is if we get 3 1/4 inches of rain, that 3 1/4 inches comes in about a 40-minute period. Basically, it rains so hard and so fast that you're just watching all of the rain run off of the garden boxes and down the sides and down the mounds and off the property into the creek. It rains so fast and so hard that nothing has a chance to soak in. So the fact that we got the 3 1/2 inches over 3 days, and there was a couple of days where it rained the vast majority of the day, was really good for the land. It also meant that it really soaked the beds, and you're going to see a few of my plants that are looking a little yellow, and that's not a nutrient deficiency, that's an overwatering. So we're kind of letting things dry out a little bit here before I start providing artificial water again. But with that said, the other thing that we're seeing here is now that it's gotten hot and humid, my cilantro is bolting. So when our cilantro gets ready to bolt, we just let it. Once it dries out and once it forms seed, we just shake the heck out of the plant, let it drop the seeds, stir it into the mulch, and then the next year I get cilantro again. So I'm hoping that just like the walking onions, in 2 or 3 seasons, this bed is going to be like overwhelmed with cilantro. There's going to be cilantro growing on the ground outside of the bed. We're going to be able to harvest a lot of cilantro during its season. And then when it goes to bolt, we don't really care because we've had plenty of fresh cilantro, and we have a ton of it dried out in the dehydrator and stored in little jars to be able to use in cooking. Our spinach is just about done. Our chives, all the flowers are going to seed. And the dill is just starting to come up. Now this is our 2nd full year with our chamomile, and you know, y'all, we have not gotten a single flower on our chamomile yet, regardless of weather. I believe, if I remember correctly, this is the Roman chamomile, but it has never flowered for us in 2 full seasons. I'm gonna leave it through the heat and then into the cool weather and see what it does, and if by next winter-ish it hasn't started to produce for us, then I'm gonna make part of my winter preparation for spring to clear all the chamomile out of this bed, try something somewhere else. Now here in this bed with the giant artichoke that survived winter, the only thing we planted in this bed, we decided to go ahead and make this a dedicated corn bed this year. So you can see these little things that are popping up that kind of look like grass. We have to be really careful when we're weeding to not come out here and pull up the corn. I don't plant a lot of corn, and we make sure that we rotate where we plant the corn. We love corn. To be able to have that fresh, right off the plant, corn on the cob that came from our garden is something we absolutely adore. But corn is really, really hard on the soil. It really sucks the nutrient out of the soil, especially the nitrogen. So you have to make sure that wherever you planted corn, that you give that bed a rest. Generally speaking, we take our corn beds and then we don't really plant in them in the winter, and we hit them really heavy with a good nitrogen source, kind of stir it in a little bit, and then just tarp it and leave it so that it can kind of build itself back up. Now, just like every year, my bucket line is in full effect. So for all of you that are new to gardening, buckets can be your friend. I grow the absolute heck out of tomatoes and peppers in my buckets. I don't ever have problems. The pest pressure is usually lesser in the buckets. So even if all you have is an apartment, you can grow things in buckets and it'll work out just fine. I've got a variety of cherry tomatoes, and that's generally what I grow in buckets is my cherry tomato varieties. But these things are taking off. I put this one in the ground about 2 weeks ago, and it was probably half the size it is now. Working down into here, we start getting into our peppers. The majority of these are more poblanos, but I do have serrano peppers in here as well. You can see they're still kind of teeny tiny. That's one of the things that we notice here in Central Texas is that you don't get a whole lot of growth out of the peppers until it gets hot, and then they take off like you just would not believe. I also like to try to grow things in different places in my garden. So there was a strawberry over there, and you saw it was super sunny over there, but that was shady this morning. So I've got another strawberry over here where it's shady now, but it was sunny this morning. That way, just the variances in light, we'll see what works better for us. I've still got a few carrots growing in this garlic bed. This bed was supposed to be rotationally planted with some more tomatoes, hence the reason that I've got the cage here. But the solar flare tomatoes that we are such big fans of that you can't buy in stores just did not do well for us in our seed starting system. So we got some in the ground and it looks like they have all died. Now in this onion and garlic bed, our tomatillos all did just fine. So I've got several tomatillos planted every couple of feet all the way down this bed. We're really hoping to get a ton of tomatillos. And supposedly these are the variety that get more like small apple sized. We were looking to get some tomatillos that were a lot bigger than the ones we grew last year. So if these end up being what they're supposed to be, which is a nice small apple sized tomatillo, then we're gonna be saving the heck out of some seed out of these and seeing if we can just start growing more of this variety. Now, the other thing that didn't really survive for us, and it's very unfortunate, is our cubanelle peppers. Everybody knows how much I love my cubanelles. So what we were able to find when we went to the big box store was, it's called a Maxi Bell, so it's a spicy bell pepper. I'm a little bit excited about that. And then we also were able to find the Marconis. So I wouldn't say Marconis are the same as cubanelles. They're definitely not. I really prefer the cubanelle pepper. But I'm glad that I was able to find these Marconis so that we could get some Marconi peppers in the ground to just kind of help us out. So along this fence, again, growing in buckets, I've got a combination of bell peppers, strawberries, Marconis, and then luckily our atomic grape tomatoes did survive, and it looks like they're growing pretty well. Obviously, they're very stunted, but they're still very green, and they are getting some size on them. And that brings us to our new box that we put in this year. So you'll notice one of the things that we did is that we attached a second piece of fence on top of the existing 4-foot fence. Now this fence is about 6.5 feet tall, and I got a wire stretched across the top to kind of help support it. That way we can trellis the tomatoes up this fence. This is a combination of the Tycoon tomatoes, and then I've got Romas in the middle and then back to Tycoons on the other side. So we're hoping we're gonna get a lot of good slicing tomatoes and then also a lot of good salsa tomatoes. We love to use Romas in our salsa. Now you'll notice some of the yellowing on the leaves here. This was actually a lot worse a couple of days ago. So that tells me that the garden is starting to dry out because the leaves are starting to green back up. And the last tomato variety that we're growing, a lot of tomatoes, is another cherry type tomato. And it's this bush style cherry tomato that you can see down here in these onions. So again, once this thing gets big enough that it really wants some light, right now it's enjoying the protection from the direct sunlight that's provided by the onions. It gets plenty of filtered sunlight, which is allowing it to get some good growth and develop some strong roots. And then once this really starts to bush up, all of these onions are going to be coming out. And that brings us to the end of the garden here, which is the arched trellis pathway. So you can see I've got spring onions on the inside here and spring onions on the inside here. We just pull these as we need them, and if they get big enough to be full-sized onions, that's great. We planted the heck out of the sugar magnolia peas this year. And I love this particular pea because almost everything on it is edible. When they're young, you can eat the whole pods. You can pull the peas out when they get a little bit bigger. We've actually taken the tendrils and eaten those as well. The flowers are also very good. So just about everything on this is edible. I don't think the leaf is toxic or anything like that. It just doesn't taste very good. But the tendrils taste like peas. The pea pods taste like peas, obviously. But peas are great fresh. And then you can eat the flowers too. I really enjoy this particular kind of pea. Now again, with our rotational planting though, very soon here it's going to start getting hot and these are going to start dying off. But that's okay because we've got a variety of different kinds of squashes and green beans that are already starting to come in behind them. I can't really tell you which one is which, but I can tell you that we planted Chinese red noodle beans. We planted a different type of long bean. We planted some loofah gourds. We planted some spaghetti squash. We planted some acorn squash. Pickling cucumbers, slicing cucumbers. So all of that is just kind of planted down along these arches where the peas are currently growing now. So that's kind of what we've got for you right now here at the end of April, beginning of May. Things are just going to continue to produce from here. I'm looking forward to continuing to do these garden tours because the garden just gets bigger and prettier, and eventually these arched trellises are to die for. So that's going to be it for this particular garden tour. If you've got any questions, drop them down in the comment section or go ahead and shoot me an email. I look forward to sharing my garden with you more in the future, and until we see y'all again, this has been Chris with Rockin' Farm. I want everyone to be happy and live healthy. Come on.